a little less confetti, please. A little less confetti. Emojis are fine. So there was a problem, and I don't know if there's any parents in the crowd. I assume you probably know what the problem is. And the problem is the children are going to wake up when the sun comes up, right? So if it's winter time and the sun comes up where I live, we have really dedicated seasons, 4 seasons. So in winter time, like it's going to be 8 o'clock in the morning, the sun's going to come up, and in summertime it's going to be like 6 in the morning. So this isn't like very compatible for everybody else. And children like to go to bed. Well, never. Children don't like to go to bed, right? So there's a lot of technology out there. So this is the creepy side, thinking about children going to bed. They never want to go to bed. So it's always creating a challenge at home, right? Because, we're going to sleeping in be 8 o'clock. Well, when your child wakes up at 6 with the sun, you're like, oh, okay. I guess we're not sleeping to 8. Good thing I went to bed at 1 in the morning. It's going to be a hard day. So there are solutions to this. So I got on Amazon. I took these screenshots. I got on an e-commerce platform, and I took some screenshots. Sorry, they're all in French because I live in France, so it defaults to the French Amazon. And basically, most of these are the same. If you look at the 3 on the right, like they're all the same, right? So there's some sort of white label device that are rebranded and sold on an e-commerce platform. And they look kind of goofy, kind of silly. We're starting around 40 euros, right? 35 euros for the cheap one, but it felt kind of funky. It felt like it's nothing that special with a smiley face on it. Then there's this expensive one, what do we call this? The Urban Hello, Remy. It's called Remy. It's got a cool smiley face on it. That got me thinking, like, oh, like that kind of looks like a screen or some sort of animation. That's kind of cool. Like something's happened. I got some ideas coming in my head. I got an app. At the end of the day, I was like looking at the price. It's on sale when I took the screenshot, but it was originally like 130, 140 euros. I'm like, for an alarm clock? Like this is insane. Like there's got to be a better way. And it like has Bluetooth. I know it's all written in French. It has Bluetooth. I'm like, so I'm paying 100 euros for an overrated Bluetooth speaker? No, there's got to be a better way. So I started thinking about my wallet. First thing, like this is costing me a lot of money. I think there's got to be a better way. And also, I was thinking about security, right? Like, do I really want to connect another third-party device onto my local network? I don't know what they did, how they connected. How does that app work? Like, who else is going to be able to hack into this device on my network? I always think about that when I buy a smart device that connects to the Wi-Fi, right? What doors am I opening up into my network? And, we tend to consider our home land secure, but once you're adding all these smart devices, things get a little bit crazy. So maybe they're mining Bitcoins in the background on this Remy device. I don't know what's happening. And maybe I'm like powering some global attack that's running from my local network. No idea. So I didn't really like that idea. I was thinking there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And I'm a geek, so that's the base of it. So got online. This was back in like December last year, so a year ago. Like, okay, Raspberry Pi 4 came out a little while ago. They were kind of scarce in demand. I could find one for like 35 euros. I'm like, wheels start turning in my head. There's got to be something cool we can do. Disclaimer, I actually bought the 4 gig model, which was 64 euros. But it would have ran on that 1 gig model. And like, okay, I'm getting somewhere. I got some Raspberry Pis, my unicorns and rainbows. And that was when an idea was born. So let's start at the top. It's a good start, but it's not enough, right? We need something else. We're going to need an enclosure and a touchscreen LCD. And I found this one. This is pretty cool. We're at 45 euros before tax, 53 after taxes. It's got an LCD built in, a touchscreen LCD built in, and a sweet little enclosure. It's pretty small. It's kind of hard to see in the pictures, but the Raspberry Pi is sitting behind the screen. So I'm thinking, like something cool is happening here. So we're getting closer. We've got a touchscreen input, LCD display. We put that Raspberry Pi inside. But we need to have sound. It's an alarm clock, right? So we need to have sound. It needs to wake somebody up. So we need a speaker. So we're getting closer. We're getting even warmer now. Maybe that's enough, right? We got touchscreen input, LCD displays, or input output. We have audio output. So I'm like creating like a real device at this point. But let's look at the cost. So my bill of materials, we're at, a little bit over 100 euros. So I haven't saved any money, right? And how much time am I going to put into this project? So clearly this is not like a cost-effective investment. A lot of euros being burned in this project, and a lot of time, sweat, tears. But of course, like any project, which we probably all know from work or other places in our life, there's always more, right? That was the estimate, 100 euros, right? Oh, but there's more. When you have some fans in there and heat sinks, that's another 6 euros. Had a fan in it that was super noisy, and like having that sit next to your head while you're sleeping, yeah, that wasn't very fun. So I had to buy a silent fan to put in there. Oh, and a Raspberry Pi. Well, you should use the Raspberry Pi power adapter. Hopefully people here have used Pis before, and you know that their power adapter is over-spec'd in how much output it has. So that's another 9 euros. You need an SD card to actually run the operating system. So there's some hidden costs in there. So things are getting a little scarier in my rainbow and unicorn land. But it was a ton of fun. And we'll get to that later. So let's talk a little bit more about the device. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the hardware now. I'll show like a little demo of what it looks like. Then we'll talk about the software stack, which is really why we're here at CityGS to talk about JavaScript. So the hardware stack. Now, we have, I think you already know this, right? Like the Raspberry Pi, touchscreen, USB speaker, a silent fan was really important, the power adapter, and SD card. And of course, I want to use that Raspberry Pi because it's hackable, right? Like this is what's fun about it. It runs full Linux desktop. I'm not just using an Esprino device, Adreno device that doesn't run a full desktop, right? I'm running a full Linux desktop. So the possibilities are huge, right? I can do tons of things. There's great docs about it. Raspberry Pis have a proven track record. There's so much documentation. There's so many accessories we can find. And it's like a full power device, right? I'm not skipping out. I'm like, okay, it just has a display. It's running some firmware behind the scenes. Like I could have videos. I could do, the possibilities are just limitless. And the USB speaker, it just works. That was the reasoning behind it. The Raspberry Pi connects a speaker like to an I2C interface. We can need like a separate card to like convert the I2C interface into like an audio output. I need to mount that inside. My enclosure is already really small. So I'm going to go USB. So I just plug it in, plug and play, and it just works. Downside is the speaker is huge, which you'll see in a minute. It's bigger than the actual device. But this is a proof of concept, right? And of course, with USB, there's that plug and play USB speaker. There's no drivers, there's no boards, there's no wires, there's no soldering. And the space challenges in my enclosure made it effective. And it was powered by USB, which is also why I wanted to have that real Raspberry Pi power adapter. Touchscreen, honestly, my stepdaughter doesn't touch this thing at all. Like, there is no interaction locally. I have an admin interface where I can set the alarm and all that, but I was like, if she knows that she can touch it and like access the menus, like all kinds of crazy things are going to happen. The alarm's going to go off at 3 o'clock in the morning. I've already seen that with her watch that she wears. So there is no interaction today, but I have ideas like some menus maybe, and maybe we could have some videos or some stories built in there. So there's lots of ideas for the future. So in conclusion, my proof of concept was really not cost effective, but damn, it was a lot of fun. And it works. So demo, I'm gonna do like a quasi demo. So I don't have the device with me. Maybe putting this weird electronic thing in my carry-on luggage just felt a little bit odd. So I don't have it with me. And today's Friday, she had to get up in the morning. I'm not there, so I left the alarm clock at home. So I do apologize for this really ugly picture. That is an ugly picture. As you can see, the device is sitting on the top, and the Raspberry Pi touchscreen is on top. The speaker's on the bottom. Sorry for this like blurry looking picture. I think I took this at night at some point and then cropped it. And you can see the speaker is bigger than the actual device. This is version 1, but there's a rooster. You'll see later in the next slide. I changed the rooster for a unicorn. Little girls like unicorns. This is a little bit more fun. So during the day, this is what it looks like. You have the unicorns and get up, start your day. Take the bull by the horns, or the unicorn by its one horn. You have this round progress bar, which fills up as the day goes on. We can't see the time. We have the time in the corner when you should go to bed. So it's going to be 8:30 in a 24-hour time. And as the day goes on, the progress bar is going to fill up. Now, the next screenshot here that I took, this is nighttime. I'm actually cheating because it's daytime. You can see it's 5:30 in the afternoon. But at nighttime, the fonts get a little bit darker. I actually change the brightness on the screen. We still have the progress bar. So a little sleeping indicator. So when she looks at the clock in the morning, she knows she's supposed to stay in bed. If we have time at the end, I can put up the actual code running on the machine. There's an admin interface where I can go in and set the wake time and the sleep time for every day, because every day is different, right? Wednesdays in France, there's no school, but there's activities, so we get up a little bit later. The weekends, there's like the alarm doesn't go off. The icons change, but the alarm doesn't go off on the weekends, so you have to be able to toggle whether there's a sound or not for each day. A lot of calendar logic went into this, which, if I have time, I'll talk about at the end. So that's the admin interface. I can show those things live later if we still have time. Now, building this device, there's this clear separation of concerns between the back end and the front end. So on the back end, if we're switching over to the software stack, of course we're running Linux, Node. I built this all using TypeScript, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. I'm using a Fastify web server, which I'll go into more details later, but I love Fastify. Fastify is the best web server. We'll talk about that more later. On the front end, we're using a browser, we're using Chromium, React, and CSS, which we'll deep dive into a little bit more. Next, continuing on that theme, front end versus back end, I have a lot of these sites, client versus server, whatever you want to talk about. This was actually a huge challenge because the front end and the back end is running on the same device. So where do I put certain pieces of logic, right? There's a big question about separation of concerns and how to manage the logic. And maybe I could have used Electron. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But I was a little bit concerned about managing the versions of Chromium, not just pulling them out of the packaging system for the Raspberry Pi OS. And if you ever use Electron, you know that we have this API to transfer data from the front end to the back end. That felt awkward to me, I guess because I just come from a domain where we either use REST APIs or we use GraphQL. So I went for just a traditional web server, front end, back end. And because I have that admin interface, like having that back-end web server separate from the front end made sense to me, even though for her, she sees the front end in front of her all the time, but I can connect with my telephone. So again, separation of concerns. We have unicorns on one side, lions, rainbows on the other side. So this is a big part of the architecture. Now, the other part of the architecture, before we go really deep dive into the software stack, was, do I want to be able to access this remotely when I'm not at home? Should I access the wide area network? Is there a way to connect on the wide area network, or should it only work locally on the local area network? And in the end, I chose the latter. I said, you know what, I want it to be secure. I don't want to have to connect to a cloud service, so I have some way to open up a port with my network so I can connect from a distance. And at the end of the day, if she's home sleeping, there's an adult with her. So I'm never going to be changing the alarm when I'm off traveling, right? Somebody's at home, and they can change the alarm. So this is really an opportunity to restrict the feature set. Okay, let's keep the features small. Let's build for what we need, not for what we think we might need one day. So we went with LAN access only. It's really made it much less complex. So keeping it simple, have the KISS principle in there, right? Keep it simple, stupid. And another challenge that we had with the front and the background, front end and the back end, sorry, is the sounds. And originally I said, well, it's the front end, it's Chromium that's going to make the sounds. But there's a security issue there. You can't autoplay a sound in Chrome or Chromium until you've interacted with the screen, until you have a click or a scroll or some sort of input. And this device just boots and it starts the browser, so there is no interaction. So this was, my original idea is like I should play the sounds in the front end, but it didn't work. So the sounds are now being pushed into the back end. Persistence was another challenge. Obviously I can configure this device, so where does that config live? Should it live in browser storage? Again, this was my original concept because I do love using the browser as a platform. But at the end of the day, I'm going to connect with my telephone and the admin interface needs to be stored somewhere. And then her device in her room is going to read those settings. So using browser storage was not going to work. Database? Well, this is like a small device. I really need a database. So I store 7 days of the week. and some timestamps. I don't think a database is really needed for this. So at the end of the day, it's just storing an JSON file on the file system. I'm interested in discussing that more, if that's a good idea or a bad idea. You could use maybe SQLite, but again, it just felt overkill to create a schema and store things in a table when it's really just a JSON file with like 20 lines of keys and values in it. Pulling. So this is the other problem. If I update the admin interface, how does her device know to update and get new settings? This was a big challenge too. Spoiler alert, I went with WebSockets in the end to dynamically update the device, any devices that are running on the front end. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. We'll speed up a tiny bit. Already talked about the sound. This was a big challenge actually to figure out where to put the sounds. Again, they're on the back end now, running off the server. And that speaker I already talked about, like USB is better. Okay, I already talked about all these things. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. TypeScript. That was slow to come around, but I am a believer. And finally, today, I don't have to transpile anymore. Thanks to one of my old colleagues in your report, Marco Ippolito, Node.js, starting in, I want to say, version 22, allowed us to do type stripping. So with an experimental flag, waiting for that to become stable, I can run TypeScript directly in Node.js using a flag, which is just amazing. I can no longer need to transpile and do weird things to have my code change. I can now use TypeScript on the front end, on the back end. So on the front end, I'm using Vite, of course, with React. So this was amazing. One disclaimer about type stripping in Node.js is it doesn't, today, in the current version, it does not do any kind of type stripping out of node modules. So obviously, it's probably not obvious. There is a shared library between the front end and the back end. This is pretty common, right? In an architecture, I want to have a contract, I want to be able to validate between the front end and the back end. So I needed to have a shared library. I do actually do a separate build step on that shared library because there was no way to do any kind of type stripping on node modules. 2 minutes? Okay. I'll go a little faster. So let's talk about the stack. Let me go a little bit faster here. So I've already talked about Linux, TypeScript, Fastify is the web server, React, CSS, which is awesome. Linux, of course, I want to use Linux. It's stable, it's amazing. I'm going to go a lot faster. I'm not going to go through these ones very much. I already talked about it. One thing that's cool about Raspberry Pi OS, which is based off of Debian, it has a kiosk mode. It allows me to boot the desktop directly to the Chromium browser. This was actually really cool. Open source, which is what we love, we know and love. Node.js, that's why we're here, right? That's what we love. We love Node.js. So I'm using TypeScript, we already talked about that. I'm using a mono repo. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. Fastify. It's fast, bro. That's why I'm using it, right? I love Fastify. It has an API that's really a pleasure for developers to use. It's actively maintained. It has a plugin architecture that's going to promote modularity and separation of concerns. And there's a WebSocket plugin, which is how I actually synchronize the data. React, well, it's React, right? Devs know it. It's stable, evolving. I'm not going to go too much detail. CSS, check this out. You haven't used it before. It's like Tailwind on steroids. Atomic CSS. This is what we're using in this project. Monorepo. Let's keep this one. We're not going to have time. It's being deployed. If anyone wants to know more details about these things, come and talk to me. PM2 for the process management and the cron job. This is a weird one. The last point, I will mention that, is after 2 weeks, the sounds stopped working, and I haven't had time to debug this issue, and I'm probably just going to have it reboot once a week. So that's a hack, right? But I have an idea of trying to debug this issue. It's not as stable as I thought it would be. So looking forward to the future. I'm going to skip to the future slide, but I have a ton of things I was thinking about doing. Having remote access, how I'm going to manage updates. I'd like to have a test model so that every change I make doesn't potentially create a bug inside the bedroom with my stepdaughter, but need some money for that. A smaller enclosure, maybe some 3D printing or something cool, and a smaller Raspberry Pi that's cheaper, right? So maybe this could be a product one day. I have no idea, but the price point today is certainly not feasible. Tons of other ideas to make this more efficient. But it's going to cost money, and maybe one day I'll make money off of this. Who knows? The future is bright. So again, so was it worth it? Probably not, if we're talking money-wise, right? But it was a ton of fun. It was such a cool thing to do, and it works, and my stepdaughter loves it. That's a win. We live in exciting times right now, right? Whether we're talking about artificial intelligence, or we're talking about Raspberry Pis, like we can build anything today. It's just so much fun. So hack everything, right? Why go and buy some cheap, funky thing on your favorite e-commerce platform? Yourself, because you are an expert. We're all experts. That's why we're here, right? And I love boosting people, telling that you're an expert, like you work in this domain, so show it off. So be an expert and build your own stuff. I'll just jump to the end of these slides. I do work in Uniform. I mentioned that. We love Node.js. We have tons of contributions and employee contributions. We're the 7th most active contributor in Node.js. So if you want to know more about Uniform, talk to me. Generally, always hiring. We also love Fastify, so I can talk about that all the time too, but I won't. The source code for this is available. Hit me up later, scan this QR code, or I can pull my phones out and take pictures. The repo is really not in very good shape because that was the